Hello. Hi, teaching buddies. This is Jamie from Not So Wimpy Teacher. And this is Adeline. If you have not met her yet, this is Adeline. She's almost 3 months old, and she's our fifth. If you didn't know, we have a 14-year-old, twin 13-year-olds, a 12-year-old, and now little Miss Adeline. So if you're joining me, I want you to know that today is the third video in our series about teaching reading. Thank you. We started off with a video about the whole group mini lessons, and then yesterday we had a video about the read to self, independent reading time. If you missed either of those, where you can see them right now, it's still on my Facebook page. And the way I'd recommend is you go to my Facebook page, Not So Wimpy Teacher, not my Facebook groups, but my Facebook page, Not So Wimpy Teacher, and click on the video tab up at the top of my page, and that'll take you to all my videos, and the ones that I just did would be the top ones, so it'll be easier to find that way than scrolling through my Facebook page. Today's video, though, is all about responding to reading. We're how to teach our kiddos how to write about what they're reading about. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. So thank you guys. Let me know, do you already have your students writing about their reading on a regular basis? Is it something they do occasionally? Is it something you haven't quite gotten to yet? I'm curious where you are at right now. Thank you. People say she looks like me, and my husband and I, we don't see it yet. We don't see what our kids look like really until they're much older, but we get told a lot. So again, let me know, do your students already do response to reading often, occasionally? We're not quite there yet. Wherever you're at, it's okay. Just helps me to know where you're at and how I can help you the most. Okay, so some do it as like a homework assignment. Some are doing it a couple times a week in centers. Excuse you, Adeline. Okay, sometimes. Here and there. It's something they struggle with, and you're not alone. I think that's the case for all students. I think that response to reading is probably one of the most difficult things we're going to ask them to do as readers, because they need to be able to read, comprehend what they're reading, and write about what they're reading. That's a lot to ask. All right, Adeline, say goodbye. It's really cold in my office, so say bye-bye. Yeah. Okay. Okay, I see lots of occasionally, sometimes, and I just see lots of you saying you're struggling a little bit, and that's to be expected. I think we all struggle a little bit with teaching our kids how to respond to reading. And like I said, I think it's one of the most tricky things we're asking them to do. They're having to read, comprehend, and write about what they're reading, so you're asking them to mix so many different skills together. And you may have a student who's a fantastic reader, but that doesn't necessarily mean they're great at writing about what they read about. So, and vice versa, you can have an amazing writer, but they struggle to be able to put what they're thinking about their book into words. So, I mean, you're not alone. If your students are struggling, you're not alone. I think it's pretty tricky, and I think we just take it a little at a time, and we just celebrate all their little successes. And hopefully by the end of the year, we're noticing a huge difference in their ability to write about what they're reading about. A lot of states are asking students to respond to text in their state tests. So it's become more and more important that we get kids writing about the text. It also is the deepest way to show their understanding of the book, to show comprehension. To be able to write about it really shows a deep understanding of the text. So it's definitely somewhere we want to go. All right, it's okay if we struggle. And I love that we're in a group right here where we can all admit, like, we're struggling a little bit. Okay. Yeah, okay, all right. That's interesting. My kids do awesome when we do it as a class, but they're struggling to do it independently. Well, I think you're about halfway there. So if you've got them doing it well together as a class, you're on your way. And you know what? It's only December. We've got time, okay? Ooh, responding to text by typing. That adds a whole nother wrench in the game, doesn't it? Responding to reading is the only type of the text-dependent type writing is the only type of writing they do on their state test. In some states that is true, which makes it even more important that we are practicing it and teaching it. Using 2 to 3 sources, that's challenging. All right, so today we're going to be talking about how I do response to reading in my class. I'm going to show you how I organized my rotations, and I'm going to tell you how I helped my kiddos to become better at responding to text. These are just some tools that worked for me. Remember always that they're your students and that you are a different teacher and you have different kiddos with different needs. You may even have different standards. So always know that you should modify things to work best for you and your kiddos, and that I'm only sharing what has worked for me in the past and hopes that some of these tools and tips might help you and your kiddos. But always, always know that you are the teacher and you should make modifications that help you in your particular classroom, okay? Someone said they do well orally responding, but not as much in writing, and that's still, we're on our way. It's a good step. Okay, so again, if you did miss one of my other 2 videos, you can check them out by going to my Facebook page, clicking on the video tab. You'll find the 2 videos that I've done the last 2 days, one on the writing mini lesson or the reading mini lesson, sorry, and one on the independent reading time. Today, I'm only going to be talking about response to reading. So here we go. I started all my videos the same way. When I talk about reading, I really want you to know that my number 1 goal always when teaching reading was to help my students love to read, and that how I chose rotations, how I did my lessons, everything that I did, I asked myself, will this help my students love to read? It's fantastic to teach your kids to respond to reading. It's fantastic if they can identify main ideas and use text features and tell you character traits and compare and contrast. Those are all wonderful skills that they are probably going to be tested on and standards that I certainly have to cover. But number 1, I need them to love reading. If they love reading, all those other things are going to be so much easier to teach to them. And ultimately in life, it's not that important to know how to identify main idea. But the adult who loves to read, that's what I want for my kiddos. I want them to become adults who love to read too. So that's a little caveat to all of my reading videos, is that I make my decisions based on love to read more so than on things like phonics and that sort of thing. So, all right. I showed this slide yesterday and I'm going to show it again and try to chat with you a little bit. This is my schedule for my reading rotations. And I have tried lots of different things that didn't work for one reason or another. And this is what I ended up with and what really worked for me. And it may not work for you, and it may not be something that you can or want to implement in your classroom. But again, I like to show you and tell you what I did because I get asked all the time. Okay, I had 4 reading groups. I had an hour to do my reading rotations. And so I only met with 2 groups. We did 2 rotations every day. That way our rotations could be just about a half an hour each. This was in 3rd grade. This was they were capable of a 30-minute rotation after training and practice, not like the first day, but they were capable of this. The reason I decided to only meet with 2 groups, and I get asked this all the time, I get asked, but you're not meeting with all your kids every single day. I used to have my 4 groups and I met with them each for 15 minutes. When you add in all of the transitions, I wasn't getting 15 minutes with each group. I was getting maybe 12. And by the time you open up text and you start reading, 12 minutes isn't very long. 12 minutes isn't long enough to read something and have a deep conversation about it and then maybe even write about it. 12 minutes didn't cut it for me in that teacher rotation. But also, even in my independent reading, 12 minutes of reading, you don't get invested and in love with a text in 12 minutes. Centers, that wasn't long enough. You get out the materials and it's time to put the materials away. Respond to reading, they're barely like looking up some text evidence and it's time to change. So I had to come up with a way, like how can they have more time? How can we get rid of those wasted transitions, and this is when I decided to only do 2 rotations. This meant less transition time wasted and then more time at one particular rotation to dive in deep. So maybe I don't see every kiddo every day, but if I add up the minutes I get to spend with them in a week, I'm now spending more time with them. So this is actually beneficial to all of my students. So now if I usually had 24 to 28 kids, so I had to have 4 groups. I had between 6 and 8 kids in a group, and I felt like that was pretty much my max. If you have a smaller class, you can have 3 groups. And so you can see what my kiddos are doing, like group 1, they meet with me on Monday and then they respond to reading for their second rotation. Tuesday they do read to self and then centers. Wednesday they're back with meeting with me and responding to reading. If I only had 3 groups, there would be a time slot where I wouldn't have a rotation of kiddos coming to me. Like I could look at center group 4 where it says meet with teacher. I wouldn't have a group to meet with me then if I only had 3 groups. So during that time, you could pull your struggling readers. You could do some RTI support. You could go and you could sit with the lower reading group and do centers with them or help them, guide them through their response to reading. You could do some reading conferences with kiddos that are reluctant readers. If you had maybe a smaller class, I would say if you had 18 or less, that you could probably go to 3 groups and then have that extra time if you're really worried about seeing every kid every day. It's not that my kids are not growing as readers every day. It's not because I have really meaningful reading rotations. Even the day that they're not meeting with me, they're doing something extremely valuable. And so I didn't feel like, it's not like I'm just giving them filler work, and so the days they're not with me aren't important. You can see that the days they're not with me, they're doing the read to self, which ultimately, number 1 way to get a kid to love to read is let them read whatever they want. And then they're doing centers, which are hands-on and engaging, moving things, but they also have lots of text and are standards-based. So all extremely important things that they're doing during that time. So I do get asked that all the time, what about? And I have to say, I spent more minutes with every single one of my readers when I switched to this this model. I found this to be more successful. So I start off my reading block with a 20-minute whole group time, and then we switch to reading rotations. So this is like a reading workshop where we have a mini lesson, and then we go into independent time because it gives me a time to differentiate and meet my readers where they are at. I got asked, what would you think about doing reading all whole group? And I would just be a mess if I had to do reading all whole group. Our readers just don't have the same needs. I'm sure your readers don't have the same needs. So having the small group was a necessity for me. Okay, no, I do not have the centers for 2nd grade. I'm working on 3rd grade this year, and they take every moment of my time right now. So I cannot commit to any other grade levels at this time, but maybe in the future. But let me get through 3rd grade before I make any promises, because they're really hard to make and I just want to stay focused. If you're interested in coming back to look at the schedule to think more about whether or not it's something you're wanting to do with your kiddos, just take a screenshot of it. Also, on my blog, notsowimpyteacher.com, if you go to my blog and use the search button, just search ELA block, you'll see an entire blog series about my whole ELA block, including reading, vocabulary, grammar, and writing. And you'll see a picture of this schedule as well so that you can read more about it. Okay, and if you're interested in the whole doing 3 groups, I actually mapped that out a little bit on my blog as well so that you could visually see it better. So if you're interested in that information, head over to notsowimpyteacher.com and then just search ELA block and you'll see it. All right. Now, yesterday we talked all about the read to self rotation. Today we're going to talk about the responding to reading rotation. I did want to tell you that there's another alternative in a way that I've done this before. Right now you can see I have 4 rotations: meet with teacher, respond to reading, centers, and read to self. If you have a technology station, something like they're using Epic or iReady or some other type of online program, my centers include a reading response. And so you could take the reading response rotation and make that technology and then they're still doing their response to reading in the centers rotation. So that's just another option for those of you who do teach third grade and use Make Centers. If you're wanting to add in the technology component, you could do that. Or if you're not in third grade and you don't have the centers to work with, you could add in the technology in place of what I call centers. You could add in a technology center instead. Okay, so it's like an option. If you don't have the centers, you could use technology. If you have the centers and you want to use technology, replace the response to reading, because my centers include a response to reading. Okay, again, you can see this and grab it on my blog or take a screenshot. But we're going to go ahead and move on. And we're going to talk all about teaching your students to respond to reading. Okay, I'm going to kind of show you the resource that my students use during a Respond to Reading Center. They use reading menus. Here's why they use a reading menu. This reading menu has 9 different prompts on it. The first 6 are for fiction and the last 3 for nonfiction. I made these to solve like a huge problem happening in my classroom. Read to self. I talked to you yesterday about how much I believe there should be student choice. Students should read whatever they want to read. A graphic novel, a magazine article, a book that's lower than their level, a book that's higher than their level. They should pick what they read. It should not be assigned, because that's how we teach a kid to love to read. We let them discover the types of texts they like. Well, I wanted my kids to respond to reading, so I was giving them these prompts, and it would say something like, what is the major problem in the book that you're reading? I was getting some strange responses, and here's why. Oh, I was getting strange responses just because, well, whenever you ask a kiddo to write about books, expect a strange response or two. But I was getting things like, I had this kiddo, his name was Chase, just the sweetest kiddo, quirky, and the kind that I totally would get along with. And he wrote me this whole thing about the problem. Well, he wrote all about whales. He was reading a nonfiction text, but he was trying so hard to answer the question that he was writing about problems whales have, which wasn't really what I was looking for, but he was trying to make it work. And I hadn't thought about that. Like, some of my kiddos are reading nonfiction, and there's not problem and solution in nonfiction. That's not how it's structured. So right away, they were set up to fail. Then I had other kiddos who had just started their book, because Read to Self, they're reading at their own pace. And so they had just started their book, and I'm asking them what the problem is. They're like, I don't know. I barely just found out who the main character is. I mean, they weren't ready to talk about the problem. Whereas other kiddos who were almost done with their book, and yeah, they could write about the problem, but it would have been nice to also ask them to write about the solution. All my kiddos were reading different things. They were all at different places in their text. And so the one question fits all wasn't working. So right away, make sure when you're doing reading response that there is some choice in the questions so that it works well with any text that they might be reading. And that's why I made my menus, actually. So each week they get a menu. My resource, I think, would work really well for grades 2 through 5, especially 3 and 4. If you teach 2 or 5, look at the preview to decide if it's right for your kiddos, because there's a huge difference in levels across different states. So take a look. But what you have here is there's 36 different menus. You have one for each week of the school year. On top of that, they're editable. So if there's certain questions you want them to ask or answer, then you could make your own menu out of the editable version. But I have 36 ready to go. They all have 6 fiction questions and 3 nonfiction. I decided to go with 6 and 3 because I noticed that probably at least 2/3 of my class chose to read fiction during the Read to Self time. A lot less were reading the nonfiction. And so that's why there's more fiction questions. So now students have choice and can pick a question that works for their text. And this takes some training. We're going to get to that, right? That's next. This takes some training to teach them how to pick a question. But if they're reading nonfiction, they're not going to pick the question about what is the problem in the story? Explain a time that you had a similar problem. That's not going to be the question they pick. What is the setting of the story? Give evidence to support your answer. That's a perfect question for someone who's just started the book, because usually you learn the setting right away. What character trait best describes the main character in your story? Why? Perfect for those fiction readers, right? Those who are reading a nonfiction book or magazine article, what new facts have you learned from your book? What is the main idea of your book, and how did the details support the main idea? What text feature did you use while reading? How did it help you to better understand the text? So questions better suited for any part of the book they might be at and any genre they might be reading. So that was the first big hurdle I had to get over. I also went ahead and added a little self-check down at the bottom. It's a way to, okay, it's mirrored. Okay, it's a way to remind them of the things they ought to be doing every time they're responding to text. And a little checklist, nice little reminder, okay? Now, how I prepared mine, some people like to just display this on their whiteboard or their smart board and have kids respond in their notebook, and that's fine. Because I graded mine, I went ahead and made photocopies of it and put the writing paper on the back for them. I didn't like grading notebooks because that was too hefty to bring home or even just cart over to my desk to grade. So I didn't do that. I'm going to get to modeling in just a minute. I just want to show you the resource I was using, and then I'm going to show you how I used it, okay? So they had a section on the back to write their answer, and then you'll notice down here, this is like beautiful, there is the rubric. The rubric is right down there, so they know exactly what you're going to be grading based on. And it's fast for me to grade it because I don't have to make a separate copy of rubrics. It's right here. I can just circle and move on. And if you send it home, parents can see exactly why they received the score they received as well. So it's all right here on the one paper, and I like that. But again, some people like to display this on a whiteboard, have kids respond in their reader's notebook, and that's perfectly acceptable. Some people like to take several menus and laminate them and put them into their center, and kids just pick up any menu and take it back to their desk and respond to it, and that's another great way to do that. These are in my store, and I will be giving you a link, but go ahead and wait a moment. Wait until the end of the video. Hint, hint. Because I'm going to be giving away some of these reading menus. So let's make sure and see if you're a winner first. And if you're here on the video, then you're already eligible to win. Okay? I'm just going to announce a few winners here and there. Okay? But this is what I used. And there is a bigger version of the rubric as well in that resource. And I'm going to be talking a lot about using the rubric. But that's the resource I use. And now I want to kind of show you a little bit about how I used it. All right, so you saw that my kiddos go to respond to reading twice a week, for half an hour each, or about half an hour, add in transitions, a little less. I only ask them to complete one reader's response a week. So they have plenty of time to do it, and that means I'm asking for really quality work. I'm not asking for just like a 2-sentence response. I'm asking them to go back to the text and use evidence. So, and then I'm asking them to edit it and turn in a quality piece of work at the end of the week. So they're doing one per week in my class, but again, in your class, do what you think works best, always. Okay. Sorry, my throat is sore and sick. Hold a break. Okay. Now, how I taught my students. I think the biggest mistake that we make as teachers when it comes to reading response is that we expect too much too soon. We send them off to independently write about their text too soon. I like to do the I do, we do, you do model. And I took my time with this. We work at such a fast pace as teachers that sometimes I think we rush it too much. It's kind of like what I was talking about yesterday with teaching them the routines and building their endurance for read to self. I feel like with respond to reading, take your time. At the beginning of the year, or if you haven't started yet, in January, get started, but take your time and give yourself some grace. Give your students some grace. This takes a while to learn. This is tricky, okay? We're going to start with the I do. This is important. So if you head back in January, you're going to start off with, you're reading aloud to your kiddos. You're reading your favorite chapter book, or it can be a picture book. It could be a mentor text type book, whatever, something you're using for another purpose in your class. And that's the text you're going to use to model the reading response. You are going to be writing on a whiteboard or smartboard, something where all the students can see it. And so you read out loud, so now they all heard the same text. That's important because you want them to have the same background, okay? They've all read it. Now you're going to pick up your menu and you're thinking out loud. You're not asking them to do it. You're not asking them any questions or anything. You're thinking out loud. You're going to say the things you want them to be thinking while they are responding to the reading. So it's kind of like this. You just read aloud and you're like, all right, now I need to pick a question to respond to. There's 9 choices here and I can pick any one of these, but it needs to be just right because I might not know the answer to some of these. Well, first of all, I'm reading a fiction book. And it says here that questions 1 through 6 are best for fiction and 7 through 9 are best for nonfiction. So I'm just going to take my pencil and I'm going to cross off number 7, 8, and 9. Okay, I'm going to cross those off because I didn't read nonfiction, I read fiction. So I already know I don't want to use those. Now I've got 6 choices. I'm going to read each one of them. Read them out loud to your kiddos so they can hear the questions and you're going to say, what character trait best describes the main character? I might be able to write about that, but I did just start the book, so I only know a little bit about the character. That's a maybe. Let's see if there's anything that's better. What genre is the story that you're reading and how do you know? I know it's fiction, but I'm not entirely sure if it's realistic or if it's going to be fantasy because I just read 1 chapter. I think I'm going to cross that one out. I don't feel very comfortable answering that one yet. What is the setting of the story? Give evidence to support your answer. Oh, well, I at least know the setting the story started in. That's a definite possibility. I'm going to leave that one for now. Number 4 is what is the favorite part of the story so far and why? I only read 1 chapter, so the only favorite part I could have right now is the first chapter. That's probably not going to be a very strong one for me to pick right now. Maybe later on I could pick that one. I'll cross it off. What questions do you still have about your story and explain your answer? I have a lot of questions about my story, so does that make it a good question to answer? I have a lot of questions because I haven't read yet though. Maybe it's not actually a good time to write that. Maybe it would be better if I'd read a little bit and then there was suspense and so my questions were more meaningful. I think I'll cross that off. What is the problem in the story? Explain a time you had a similar problem. I don't know the problem yet. I've only read 1 chapter. So I guess that one's crossed off too. So I guess I only have 2 to pick from. What character trait best describes your main character? And what is the setting of the story? Which one of those could I do best? Which one of those do I feel like I have the best answer for and I can support it? Probably the setting. The author spent a couple of paragraphs explaining the setting to me. So I think that's going to be the question I'm going to pick. I'm going to go ahead and circle that one. All of that just to show them how to pick a question. And you know what? You're not even going to do it just once. You're going to do that for several days. But that's just an example of how you're doing the I do. You're going to continue on because now you're going to answer the question. And the whole time you're thinking out loud. You're not taking questions for them. You're not getting their opinions or answers yet. Let them listen to you, okay? Because you want them to have this conversation with themselves in their heads when they get to writing. So next I'd be like, well, what is the setting? I need to get my book out. Anytime I'm responding to text, I need to first look in the book for my answer. Get out your book. Oh yeah, right here on page 3, the author is describing the character's bedroom, and I think that's the setting, at least so far. Now I'm going to start writing. When I start writing, I'm always going to start by repeating part of the question. So the question is, what is the setting of the story? I'm going to start with, the setting of the story is Michaela's bedroom. On page 3, the author tells us that Michaela's bedroom is decorated in purple and has a large bed with fluffy pillows and a huge stuffed teddy bear. Okay, model for them, right? And keep modeling what you want them to do. Okay, I'm gonna go back to the text now. What did the author say? Oh yeah. Oh, did I answer all the questions? Oh, it says give evidence to support your answer. Oh, I'm giving evidence right now to support my answer. Did I answer the question completely? Let's see. Well, setting is the time and the place. Oh, I didn't tell when the story is taking place. I better go back and explain that too. You are doing a whole bunch of talking, which is not how I love to teach, but right now, this is what they need. They need to hear it. They need to see you do it. They all have heard the same text, and they're watching you. do this for a few days. And every class is different. Every group of kiddos is different. If you've been doing reading response for a while, you may only need to do it once or twice. If you have not been doing reading response at all, you may need to plan to spend a week doing it. Maybe you don't have enough time to do a whole response each day. Remember that they're going to be breaking it up into pieces as well. They won't be doing the whole response in one day probably. So it's okay if you only get through choosing a question one day, and then the next day you draft it, and the next day you edit it with them. But you want to do it in front of them, and you want to think out loud. Okay? All right, so you've done some thinking out loud, so they have seen what a great reading response is going to look like. They have seen at least one, maybe a couple, do a few. It's awesome if you could also get to a nonfiction one, even if it's like you read a passage during science or social studies time. Use that as your shared text and show them how to do it with nonfiction. Okay, so it's never too late to get started. The bum part would be if we just don't do it at all, right? Okay, done a lot of I do, now you're ready to get to the we do. A couple of different ways I've done we do, and I would mix them both, or just pick the one that you feel like best meets your classroom needs, of course. Okay, so for we do, I generally would start with whole group we do. Again, with the class read aloud, or a passage they've just read in science or social studies, or even if you have to use a reading curriculum and you've read a story from the Basil. Anything where they've all read the same text or heard the same text. Now the we do is a lot like the I do, except for now you're going to ask them their opinions. Maybe they have the reading menu in front of them, and so you're like, all right guys, let's work on how we're going to pick the question. Why don't you turn and talk to your partner, read through the questions, and figure out which one or two would be good options for us based on what we've read. Give them like 2 minutes, 3 minutes. Don't give them too long. And you give students too long, they get off topic. Maybe they don't quite finish, but it's better than getting them off topic and losing track of focus here, okay? Then come back together and do it together. Like, okay, what did you guys think? Should we pick from numbers 1 through 6 or numbers 7 through 9? Oh, we read nonfiction, then we can just cross off 1 through 6. That's good, guys. That's perfect. That's the first thing we need to do. Now we've narrowed it down to just 3. Which of these 3 do we want to do? And chat with them about why they would pick a question or wouldn't pick a question. That way they can have a chance to practice that together. And I do lots of turn and talk to your partner, because kids need permission to talk. Saying it and hearing it help commit these things to our memory. It gives them a little bit of practice, and you can quickly walk up and down your classroom and hear some conversations going on so that you know where to pick up. Like if you heard some strange things, you're like, wow, they really don't understand question 8. When we get to talk in whole group, we better explain question 8, because they're going to see that when they work independently later. And that's the other bonus of going through a couple of different menus together, is that they see a lot of the questions and get to ask you for help if they need it. Okay. So during the we do, you're going to work together to pick a question, and then together you're going to say, okay, how should we start? Turn and tell your partner what our first sentence should be. Okay, you're right. We should start by repeating part of the question. So we picked the question, what is the main idea? So we should start with the main idea of blank, 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 blank is perfect. Good. We restated part of the question. Now, we need to give some evidence from the text. Where can we find some evidence? We should be looking for supporting details. Where did you find some supporting details? Turn and tell your partner one supporting detail you think we should include. They are not having to produce something for a grade, but they are still helping you to come up with a class response. Okay? Now, this requires a lot of classroom management. When you're doing this whole group activity and you want to keep kids engaged, they're all like sitting still, you need to keep them engaged. That's why a lot of turn and talk to your partners. And that's why you also want to keep it pretty fast, okay? Another way to do we do that might be a little bit easier with the engagement, and you can do both. I would do both, but if you don't feel like your class can handle the whole group, try it in your small group rotations. I would model all the steps in one day if you have time. But again, like I said, it's okay if you don't. Maybe today you're just going to work on picking a question. Tomorrow you're going to work on drafting it. The next day you're going to work on editing it. But if you have time to go through a whole rotation of how to completely do it, then the next day you can completely do another one. It gives them even more opportunity to practice each step. So it kind of depends on your timing. But another way we do is in your small group reading. So take some breaks from what you have been using in your small groups to practice this because it's so important, and you know that most states test them on this. Now in your small group, you have a shared reading. It could be your class read aloud or something your whole class read. That's fine because they've read that. Or it could be something just your small groups read, whether it's a reader from your curriculum, a passage that is leveled for them, or a novel that you're reading as part of a book club or novel study. Okay, so just they have to have a shared reading experience in order to work together on these. And on the We Do, you're still working together. So now in the small group, you're really doing the same thing you would on whole group, but you only have that like 4 to 8 students. A little easier to keep them engaged. They need to be helping you. During the I Do, you were doing all the work and they were just listening. During the We Do, you want them to help you, but it's not something they're doing independently. It's not something you're going to grade. So you're going to go through the process of like how to pick out a question. How do we start our answer? Where in the text should we go to find our answer? How do we make sure we've shown evidence? And really important part that you should do during the We Do and even during the I Do, model this. Take out the rubric. After you've finished a response, either as an I Do or a We Do, take out the rubric and go through it. Explain to them what a rubric is so that they know how to use it on their menu. If you're choosing to give them the writing paper that has the rubric on it, you want them to know how to read it. So you want to explain to them that their goal is to get all 2s on each section, and that sometimes, because we're not perfect, that we're sometimes going to get 1s and 0s, and that's just a place where we know we're going to need to improve on and grow. So go through the rubric and explain to them what it means. So completion. To get a 2, the answer has to be complete. It can't just be partially answered. If it's partially answered, then we're going to get a 1. Sentences. The answers have to be incomplete sentences, and part of the question has to be used in the answer in order to get a 2. So we're going to talk about what that means. Now, you're going to take the rubric and you're going to go over your draft and kind of grade it together. Okay, guys, is the answer complete? Did we answer everything? Well, let's go back to the question. Let's read it. Did we answer every part of the question? All right, we give ourselves a 2. All right, let's look at our sentences. Are they complete sentences? What is a complete sentence? We have to have capital letters. We have to have punctuation. We have to have a subject and a predicate. Okay? Was part of the question used in the answer? Let's underline it. Let's find it and make sure. All right, good. Now we can give ourselves a 2 for that. Thoughtfulness. Is the answer thoughtful, or does it show limited thought? Did we really put some effort into this, or did we just kind of give a fluffy answer? Explain to them what that means. And it's okay if your draft doesn't get a perfect score. In fact, that's a better learning opportunity anyways. Text evidence. Is the answer supported with significant text evidence? Is it just a tiny bit of text evidence, or did you really dive into the text and use it to answer your question? And editing. Does the answer have very few errors? So have them grade your group response together. Show them how you are going to be grading it. So then later on, they know exactly what you were doing. Okay? All right. So that's the We Do. First, you were doing all the work and thinking out loud. The We Do, you can do it whole group, you can do it small group, you can do it both. But the idea is that they are assisting. Now it's time for You Do. My recommendation is to first do the You Do in a small reading group instead of just part of their rotations independently at their desk. You're not there, you're not able to help them because you're busy with another reading group. I would just recommend this because it's one more opportunity for you to get to guide them before they're doing something that's maybe for a grade. I would have my reading group do it. And that way I'm sitting right there and I can assist them and say, ooh, don't forget, you should be opening the book quite a bit if you're using the text for evidence, right? In order to make very few spelling errors, you could probably use the book to help you with some of the spelling. Those sorts of hints. And then after you've given them enough time to work on it, then as a group, you could even trade and use the rubric to grade, or don't even trade, have them grade their own using the rubric as you go. They are doing all of the work, but you're still there if they're getting frustrated, if they need assistance understanding the questions, that sort of thing. If it's a higher reading group, you watched them through the We Do and you just really feel like they've got this, then you might be able to go ahead and do the You Do just as part of your reading rotations. They're doing it independently and you're not right there. But you might just try one round of them right at the table with you doing it. So they can say, Miss Sears, I don't understand what this word means in the question. And you know what I would tell them? Instead of telling what the word means right away, I'll come back to what the word means, because of course I want them to know if it's in the question. But I might say, you know what? If I didn't understand what the question meant, I probably would not pick that question for my response. Because that's the truth. That's one of the problem-solving strategies I teach my students, that sure, I want them to learn what all those questions mean. But while I'm busy with a reading group and they're doing this independently and they don't understand what a question means, instead of coming to me to say, what does this question mean? I want them to pick a question they already know what it means. And then we can talk about it after reading, or maybe the next time they come to my reading groups would be a great time to bring it up. Okay, so I do. Get in front of them, write your response. You do all the work, but you're thinking out loud so they can hear you. We do. You can do this whole group, you can do this small group, but basically you are guiding them through the whole process. They are turning and talking to partners to come up with good response, that you're making a class response, basically, or a group response. I do recommend trying it in a small group setting first, and then when they're ready, put it into your reading rotations, have them do it independently, and you can grade them. With the first grade, go over it together, maybe in a reading group after they've already turned one in and you've graded it. Maybe you take 5 minutes in your reading group to go back through the rubric with them and help them to understand where they're at. And if you have kiddos who are still struggling and they don't do well, have a little conference with them. Maybe when your higher group is meeting, you could take 5 minutes away from them, let them work independently for 5 minutes. Will you pull a kiddo and say, hey, I want to talk to you about your reading response. I want to give you some hints about how you can improve. All right. So the rubric and all the menus are in my reading menu resource, and I promised you that I was going to give away a few of these resources for you, my reading response menus. Again, it's 36 different menus and they're editable, so you can actually make even more. And it comes with rubrics and writing paper. All right, my first winner, and if you were on the video and commented at all, you were automatically entered into the contest. You didn't have to do anything else special. My first winner is going to be Jennifer Myers Franklin. Jennifer Myers Franklin. You are my first winner. And if my winners want to go ahead and give me an email or send me a Facebook message so I can get the resource to them, that would be fantastic. I will drop my email for those winners. There's my email address for the winners. Jennifer Myers Franklin was my first winner. My second winner, good luck to you. My second winner is going to be Robin Carmine. Robin Carmine. I'm going to give you my reading resource menus, the 36 menus in rubric. These are fantastic. I definitely think grades 3 and 4 would really benefit from them, but I have many 2nd and 5th grade teachers who choose to use them. And I think if you're teaching 2nd or 5th, really look at the preview to decide if you think it would be adequate. Remember that your students don't have to be able to answer all 9 of the questions, the idea being that they're going to pick the one that they can best answer, given the text they've read and their current skills and ability. Okay, so I already picked Jennifer Myers Franklin and Robin Carmine. I am going to pick one more winner. But if, for some reason, that winner is not you, I wanted to let you know that I put my reading menus on sale for today, Saturday only. So if you're watching this on Saturday, either live or as a replay, my reading menus are on sale for 20% off. I wanted you guys to get a good deal on them when I was talking about them. Oops, I clicked something. All right. So my third winner, I will go ahead and give you a link to those reading menus too. My third winner is Katie Gorman Pick. Katie Gorman Pick. You are my third winner. So Jennifer Myers Franklin, Robin Carmine, and Katie Gorman Pick. You are my 3 winners this morning, and you'll receive my reading menus for free. If you want to just go ahead and send me an email, I will get them out to you quickly. The rest of you, don't forget my reading menus are on sale today only for 20% off. I want to give you a little bit of a deal. And I want to stick around. I have a little bit if you want to ask some questions specifically about reading response or the reading menus. I can answer a few questions for you. Oh, I'm glad you guys are excited. Oh, thank you. Some people are talking about the reading menus and how much they've helped their kiddos. You are very welcome for a sale. You are very welcome for the help. I enjoy being able to do this for you while you're home from school and have a little chance for some PD. The rubric is not editable, but you can always use what I've written on my rubric as a guide, a starting point for you to make your own rubric. Simply insert a table into Word or PowerPoint, and you can make your own rubric if you need to. I'm trying real hard to read them. Sometimes the comments go fast. I don't have my kids eventually answer every question in the menu because it doesn't necessarily work for the book that they're currently reading. So I actually give them a new menu each week, but you could rotate back through. You could prepare just 10 menus, or you could give them a new one every single week. The questions will repeat themselves just in different varieties, so there's always one that they can pick to answer. But if they always choose to read fiction during read self, then those last three would never be questions they could pick, or vice versa. So, no, I don't. You could use Google Classroom, sure, for your reading response. You could have them type it up, of course. I didn't have access to Google Classroom. I didn't have enough technology, so I did not. But absolutely, it'd be very easy for you to do that. Yes, in my rotation, cows had 2 times to do reader's response. Let me see if I can go ahead and go back to that. Oops. There we go. So my kiddos had 2 different times that they worked on the reader's response, but they had 1 response they're responsible for turning in each week. I will try to make these videos and get them up on my YouTube soon. Right now, with the baby and the 4 big kids home for winter break, it's hard to do anything more than just these lives. If students were to finish their answer at the beginning of the week, first of all, they may be someone that needs to be conferenced with about the quality of the work. But if they're still turning in quality work and have more time, then I would let them read to themselves more. That's why my response to reading is the same day as Meet the Teacher, because then they could actually get extra read to self in that day since they don't have it that day. So that's what my kiddos do if they finish early. I was required to use a reading program. I didn't make them do the weekly story because not all my kids enjoy the weekly story. I let them use the reader's response for what they were reading during Read to Self. It was a way of keeping them accountable to some extent for their Read to Self, but you most certainly could have them use the weekly story. Okay. Some of the questions went a little too fast and I couldn't see them, so if I didn't answer your question, I do apologize and you're welcome to ask it again. How do you use a data tracker? Yes, my resource comes with a data tracker. That's a good question. Let's see, I have it right here. I have it right here. Here it is. I have a data tracker you can give to students. So if you're giving them a reading menu each week, they can write the menu number down here, and they can graph their score each week. So out of 10, that's how much is on the rubric. Out of 10, they can graph their score each week so they can see if they're growing and improving. And it's kind of a motivator and helps them to take accountability for their own work. If you're trying to use a link right now and you're on your phone, it won't work while I'm live. Links work better when I'm not live. This is a good question. How do you know if the answer is correct if you're not reading the book? Okay, here's the thing. I don't know for sure that their answer is correct. What I'm actually grading them on more than anything is their ability to support their answer. Their ability to completely answer a question and support it with text. Okay? So what is the best character? What is a character trait to best describe the main character? I haven't read the book. I don't know that character, but if they say the best character trait to describe Johnny is that he is lazy. I know this because on page 6, his mom had to ask him to clean his room 3 times because it was a huge mess. Also, on page 12, his teacher was upset with him for not doing his homework. Therefore, I know that Johnny is lazy and doesn't do the things he is supposed to do. I don't actually know, but they supported it well enough to make me believe it. Then that is a good reading response. They used text evidence to support it. So that's really what I'm going off of. How well they supported themselves, which you explain to your students how important it's going to be for them to support their answer, because you haven't always read all of their books. So if you don't support the answer and you don't give them enough evidence to believe you, then you'll know that their answer isn't strong enough. Okay? That's mostly what I'm grading it on. If they can support it, if they can talk me into believing it, then it's good enough. So that's how I do it. But if you're using your basal story, then you'll have read the story. So it's up to you. But that is a good question. I hope that helps you. Tomorrow, let's talk about the next couple of videos. I have 2 more. So tomorrow, Sunday's video is going to be all about reading centers. I'm going to really show you the centers that I use. I only have them available for 3rd grade, but it might be something that even other grades you might be interested in seeing what I do, so that you can determine if it's something that you could add into your routine. And then on Monday, I'm going to be talking about book clubs. Book clubs are actually what I do with my guided reading groups during Meet the Teacher time. So I'm talking a lot more about my book clubs, how they're very different than book clubs that you've seen or heard about before, and how I use them with my small groups. How many do you grade during a period? Okay, let's talk a little about grading. First of all, yes, you do need to grade them, especially at the beginning, because they really need feedback. My 3rd graders were out writing novels, so that just helped me get a little easier. You're looking for very specific things. You're using a rubric to look for those very specific things, and that makes it a little bit easier and quicker. It does take time. It's the only part of my reading block that I spend very much time doing any kind of prep or grading with. The other part is just assessments, and they're easy to grade. So this does take me a little bit of time. That being said, I don't grade every week. Maybe at first, maybe the first 3 weeks I grade every one of them. But then after that, go to every other week. Nobody will know. Unless you need a whole bunch of grades, and I know some of you do. In that case, I'd probably throw in some reading exit tickets during my whole group lessons periodically. But it's true, reading responses take longer to grade. One thing you might do is you might grade, and don't tell them. If they know it's not going to get graded, they're not going to do their best. So this is a quiet thing. Maybe group 1 and 2, you grade 1 week, and the next week you recycle group 1 and 2, and you work on group 3 and 4s. It's totally up to you. I know that some people are shudder, oh my gosh, she didn't grade it. But yeah, sometimes you don't have to grade them all. It's okay. That being said, you do get quicker at grading them because you get better at looking for exactly what you need to find in the responses. So you get faster at it. I don't like grading them in notebooks. That takes me longer, flipping through the notebook trying to find the answer kind of business. So that's why I went to actually just photocopying a piece of paper. This is easier for me to take and grade, and it also limits them, don't write more than this. It does not take more than this to answer the question. The goal is not to write the most, the goal is to write something quality. So this helps, and the rubric's right here on the paper, and that makes it way faster. I will be talking about centers, my center rotation tomorrow. Yeah, I know I sometimes say meet the teacher and I sometimes say my guided reading group. I do use those interchangeably. To my students, I always call it meet the teacher because it just tells them exactly what it is. Come to meet the teacher. It makes sense to them. I use the same term for math. During our math rotations, they have a meet the teacher. It just tells them exactly what they're supposed to be doing, coming to the teacher. Sometimes that's true. Sometimes you just look for completion. So maybe 1 week it's worth less points, and everyone who completed it gets those points. If you can tell they completed it. That can help speed it up some weeks. But you should grade for content periodically because obviously you want them to continue to grow in their ability to respond to text. So that's important. Okay. Yes, most of my kiddos will take both days to finish their reading response if you've really modeled all of your expectations and that it's not a 2-sentence quick response, that they should be using evidence and complete sentences and editing. It actually will take most of my students that much time. Some of my students no, and they would get a lot of extra read to self time, and that does not bother me one iota. The more time they spend in books, the better. Just one question a week. All right, so I'm starting to get a lot of repeat questions, so I'm going to go ahead and say goodbye so that those who need to start from the beginning to watch the replay can do so. Don't forget that all of my reading menus are on sale for today only, just Saturday. So if you're watching it live or you're watching the replay today, they are on sale, 20% off. And I'm going to go ahead, I've dropped a link to them, but I'm going to go ahead and as soon as I get done, I'm going to edit the description to give you a link to those reading menus. I've got a few questions that would be answered with the first video. How long is my reading block? About 80 to 90 minutes. What do I do on Friday? Fridays we did have reading centers. We did extra science and social studies during that time. If you did miss the first videos, go ahead to my Facebook page, Not So Wimpy Teacher, and you'll find them by clicking on the video tab. All right, so I will see you tomorrow. Tomorrow we're talking about centers, and I'm going to have some centers to give away. So make sure you tune in if you want to be a winner. Have a great day, guys. Bye.